name's Mara Pollock, and this is my Monster Hunter World UX UI deep dive. So, my task over this past semester was pretty much to take a problem, which was game UX UI design within top games like Monster Hunter, and how poor they were. So, I basically looked at some workflows within Monster Hunter and wrote all of them down, described all of them, and I was able to take those workflows, figure out which one needed the most work, and then that workflow that needed the most work, I decided to remake entirely. So I made all of the assets for it, I decided to plan it out in a more accessible way, etc. So, this is the start of my presentation just about Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter is a very, very loved game within the community. Its fans love it. However, almost everyone comes to the same conclusion that its UX and UI for players, new or even seasoned gamers, has been very lacking. And this is the older game, so this one is the 2018 version of Monster Hunter. They recently had Monster Hunter Wilds come out, but within that deep dive, pretty much, I just found that Monster Hunter had a lot of problems for how popular of a game it was, and I really wanted to kind of talk about those more and talk about how I would fix them. So, pretty much my first steps were to rework the options menu. I remade my options workflow to optimize the settings because the options workflow is available pretty much any time in the game. So if you're in the game and you're fighting a monster, or you're just in the regular menu, you're in your home world, etc., you're always able to access the options menu. So I thought remaking this options menu would be a really good idea, and it could be implemented in more places than just fighting a monster. I wanted to do this to make the game more user-friendly because sometimes games have an issue of being very fun, being very intriguing. However, they're not very user-friendly, so they're not beginner-friendly, which usually has an impact on girls because girls usually don't start playing games sooner. So in all, accessibility, all in all, only helps build other people up that might not have the knowledge that the game developers are used to. So I wanted to make it have more of an open layout while still remaining true to the game's branding. I created a prototype of what the current game, just what's on the market, what you can buy today, what their current options menu workflow looks like. So let's dive in. So this is the home page for the game right now. I was currently on my game today to just see if it changed at all, and this is what it looks like right now. So it's just very, it doesn't utilize the space really well, and it's very aesthetically pleasing because of the great graphics, but if you look past the great graphics and just single out the text and the interface, it's just really hard to look at, in my opinion. So you go to the options menu, and you're met with the neon options, which is the only neon options, the only neon blue color on the whole screen. So it doesn't really fit, it doesn't really create that unity that you want to have in an aesthetically pleasing and accessible interface, because they've got the nice colors of the darker blackish brown combining with the darker mustard yellow, and that looks very nice, especially for the game's aesthetic, and it still blends with the green in a better way than the teal does. So that was an interesting design choice on their part, but they did include a visual objective, which was nice. However, you can kind of see they explain what each different setting does at the very bottom in very small letters, which is really hard to see. You can also see that it says that you can confirm and go back with your mouse. So it kind of has these blatant instructions on every page, but sometimes the instructions aren't needed, so they just kind of jumble up the page, causing it to be really confusing and not really knowing where to go. So if you go to the display page, it's kind of similar. These little arrows only show up if you hover over it. So you can't really hover over it and or you don't know it's a scroll like the arrow until you completely click on it and choose to do that. So if you were playing for like the first time or something, it would be really difficult to find how you're supposed to change this setting. And I also thought it was very interesting that they included different settings that only show up if you have that enabled on your computer, which I feel like could be put into like a separate category, just so it's like yet again doesn't make the screen too cluttered and keeps the most important stuff like at the top, so it's more easily accessible for for just players in general, just making everybody else's life easier. You can see that brightness is down here, and it is actually a button, but it is not a button. The game doesn't have buttons like this. It doesn't, so it's very hard. You have to specifically click on it, and then it takes you to change your brightness. So I thought if it was a little bit more clear on what to do, that would probably be a better thing for everyone. And I also thought it was very interesting. Just yet again, text is very small on the screen, and to go back, you have to press this little, you have to press the mouse button to go back, and you cannot click these words on the game once you've clicked into one of them. So you always have to go back, and that takes you back to this kind of scroll. So this scrolls, and as that happens, it gets very difficult because the most normal thing that people are used to is just, looking at your settings, clicking over here, or looking at your settings and like choosing which one. So going back, it just feels very clunky and hard to use. But this is the audio one. You can see they're normal audio settings, but this setting is off. Some of them, they just don't really go in line with each other. Like they don't match very well. So just kind of changing those up and making it more obvious what each button does. For language, you can see that once you click on the text, then it appears with the list of the different languages you can choose to the side, which I thought was a bit interesting just because it kind of takes you into the same thing like this. So this is no longer accessible until like you click this, and then this makes this no longer accessible until you click one of these. So it just gets a little difficult, and it feels a pretty unambiguous. It feels like it's not very flexible. Going over to privacy, it has the privacy policy, which is just a link to their browser, as well as your agreement or disagreement to them collecting your data. So this is another kind of, in my opinion, waste of space, because this space is all empty, and it yet again has the pretty graphics, but it just looks strange because there's so much going on while there's nothing going on that side. I also wanted to highlight how if you hover over key config in the game, it comes up with nothing, so you have to click it in order to even see what settings you can change. So if you were to click that setting, it would show the different WASD, blah, blah, blah. But when you hover over it, it doesn't really show anything, which kind of, is difficult to just see and keep moving and figure out what settings you need to change. And then for key configuration, there's that one. And then pretty much for default, I thought it pretty much is just, it asks you in the middle of the screen if you would like to change your settings back to the default settings, which I thought was interesting that they have that in its own category when that could be done in the interface as well as in the other sections, so you can like change your audio settings if you'd like to, etc. So kind of going off of that, I would like to show my prototype. So this is my prototype. This is the home screen that I recreated. I did find this image on the web, but they have a lot of high resolution images. And as you can see, I moved the credits. The credits used to be within the scroll bar. However, I thought that wasn't very, it didn't feel like it was really implemented in like a proud way. The credits here, it's pretty, it blends in with its surroundings well. It blends in with the crest in the background, but the credits are directly under the logo, so you can kind of, like, if you want to see, like, who did this, who did that, it kind of gives respect to the creators in that way. For my workflow, I wanted to highlight, like, my start game. If you start the game, it takes you to your Monster Hunter character and your save data. I wanted to highlight, I changed this. I feel like it goes with the aesthetic of the game more. I kind of kept the green magic orb. It really goes with the logo, and I feel like it sticks to the game's branding really well. As well as the font, it's more stylistic rather than plain, and kind of immerses you into the game a bit more. So if you were to go to options, this is what I started with. I recreated it so all of your different options are in the upper left-hand corner, because most people in the West, they read right to, or left to right. And of course, Capcom is a Japanese company, but just for this sake, like, it was already on that side anyway. So it's kind of like nice to kind of see it go like left to right. I made the default settings have its own button, and I put that in the upper right, so it's a little harder to kind of just like accidentally click on, because if you change all your settings, you have them perfect, and then you accidentally click please wipe my default settings, that sucks. So I kind of put that button up there, and I reworked the buttons so they were a little bit more visually stimulating as well as cohesive. So the arrows are always visible, but you can see where, if there's small, like if this is there, that means that there is something smaller than that. So if you need the text smaller, you would be able to put it smaller than that. Or on this side, if you need to click this side, that means that there is a medium. And that just kind of tells you subliminally, like, hey, there's more here, or there's more options this way. So rather than like having to click on the button and then have it show up, you kind of know what you're getting into before you click the button. I also created these little visuals for the gamepad layouts, because within the old layout for this game, it kind of had just the icons. It had the icons not very pronounced. It didn't really have many visuals, and visuals are always better to get your audience captivated and interested. So if I'm looking at like this, I'm looking at gamepad layouts, and I see a gamepad, and then on controller keybinds, I see a normal controller button and like a check mark, and that's kind of shows like, oh, you're key binding, so you're binding the keys, kind of just like logo design, stuff like that. The confirmation button binding, it's just a good idea for controllers, because it was a good idea for them to have their own section, because within the older game, or the other one, the other prototype, they didn't have a section for controller keybinds, so I thought that would be good to implement. I also made a little toggle for on and off, because before, as you saw, the buttons just pretty much said on, and then if you clicked it, you could change it to off. But kind of being able to visualize, like, this is on, this, if I press this side, it'll turn off. It's kind of just a good visual decision maker. So rather than having to go back each and every time, you just pretty much are able to adjust these here and click here in order to change them. So for display, I made these a bit more, made them a bit more optimized. So I added a few buttons, as you can see, like optional settings and going to the adjustment menu, because like you saw before, the brightness setting, it did not have its own, little thing that told you where you were going to go. You just ended up somewhere else. So you pressed on it and the menu would appear, and then you just had to kind of go with the flow. But in this, yet again, it's telling you I'm going to the adjustment menu, and that's where I am going to end up. I did the same thing. I kind of made all the arrows easier to see, and also kind of brought the grain orb back so you can see where you're hovering, where your cursor is. Of course, it would have an animation if it was like an actual coded workflow, but I also made it so if you hover over each of these, you are able to then see kind of the explanation of them right here. So it's not just telling you the explanation as soon as you click on it, but if you hover over it, you can see it, and then choose a different setting if that's not the setting that you need to change first, rather than having to click on anything. For this one, I changed up a lot of the like the minimum and maximums. They are pretty much the same. They were sliders before, but kind of just utilizing all of the space like I needed to. It pretty much looks like it's taking up the entire space, and it's easily readable, so you're not going through and getting lost in all of the information. I have more of the toggles down here just to show like, oh, this is off, this is on. And then same thing, the voice volume is, when it hovers, you can see the voice volume and what it is saying to you to maybe help you understand what setting you need to change. When you go to language, I made it so you can see the text and you can change it to English, toggle it this way, or you are able to go to the language list, which then you would be able to see different languages. So subtitles on and off, they're right there. And if you click this, you're able to kind of see the different languages that would appear, and if you click on them, you choose which one, and then they would show up. So it gives you like the option to look at all of them rather than just making you toggle them. So whatever is easiest for the user, that's what they can choose. And then pretty much with the language, privacy policy, I did the same thing. I just made it a link to the browser. However, this link, I made it look like a link. So it actually looks like it's going to be taking you somewhere else, rather than you're clicking in a game and then randomly your internet browser pops up, and you're like, why? Because sometimes that can mean it's a virus. So making it look like a link and making it stylistic so it keeps that immersion going. And yeah, this is, I did keep this in because there really wasn't anywhere else to put it. But the play data collection and analysis is just a toggle. So if you agree, you agree, and if you press this arrow, it'll go to disagree. Really easy, just easier to be able to tell the difference. And then for key configuration, I implemented a multi-use for Q because before it was explaining the whole thing as camera focus, target selection, and slinger aim toggle, just in parentheses behind it, rather than just calling it a multi-use button, which is basically your choice button. So like usually there is a game where WASD is your normal use, like keys to move around, and then you'll have like a use button, which is either E or Q because they're really close. I also included in this frame that you can change all of your keybinds to the default settings. So if you needed to change your keybinds, like you changed them all and then you just wanted them back to normal, you would be able to press that and it would change all of them. But I also had the little instruction in the corner of the screen that says right click on the key to return it to its default bind. And so then you know to right click on the key in order to do that, rather than just like accidentally doing it, or like if you didn't want to change all of your keys and just wanted to change like one of them or two of them, then you'd be able to do that pretty easily. And it's telling you so you're not confused and like looking for where do I do this. Dash was also interesting. It had dash twice rather than just combining it into a button. So on dash, I made it so you can press this and it'll just go to hold. It had it dash, press once in parentheses, and then another dash, and then hold, and then the dash press once wasn't bound to anything in my keybinds, even though I just downloaded the game, and it had only gone to hold. So it was working in hold, but it wasn't working in press once. So I feel like just having that kind of condensed button version rather than just putting a bunch of dashes and up and downs all over the screen is a good idea. I also put a button down here so you can change the sub keybinds because that was an option in the game, and I did want to keep that, like, keep the game, all of the options that you have in the game within this prototype. So if you needed to change the sub keybinds, because when I was playing I didn't have any sub keybinds changed, but if you needed to change them, you would be able to go in there and then change all of your sub keybinds rather than seeing, oh, these are main keybinds and these are sub keybinds. It just keeps them separate, so it's a little less confusing. And then also, which in the past prototype, or in the actual game, you are able to change your keybinds for different ranged weapons or melee, which is a good idea in theory. However, there's so much, there's just not a lot of change, like it's not, it doesn't make sense to have them in like the different tabs that they had them in, because they had 3 different tabs, so you could choose a ranged weapon or melee or your just regular action keys, and that just wasn't, it didn't make much sense. So I decided to kind of condense it, and you can change them still, but it just takes you to a different page. And then that is pretty much my prototype. I reworked this entire workflow, created all the assets myself, and I just wanted to get into my presentation again. So I am currently, whoopsies, I am currently I looked at some different UX UI guides because doing my research, there weren't many guides out there for game developers, which I know quite a few game developers within the major because ETBD and game dev is very close, so a lot of the classes overlap. So I know a lot of game developers, and they have told me that like accessibility just isn't really um, talked about and understood within the community as well as it should be, and that is shown in like these search results that I found because I was looking for just a general UX UI guide for game developers, which usually, um, even if the result doesn't come up right away, a pretty decent source will come up eventually. But I was getting a bunch of blog posts about UX UI design, and even some of those were scattered with like AI generated images, which doesn't really make sense, especially when you're talking about UX UI design. So designers are probably not keen to do that first. They're probably going to design their own assets first. Um, but pretty much, I also found this blog post. It was written by a growth marketing manager, which really didn't make sense to me. Um, because, yes, the games have great UX UI design, like why Fortnite and Minecraft are household names. It just feels kind of like an onion post or something that's not very serious. But a UX UI guide by like professionals would be a very good idea to get kind of a Bible of UX UI knowledge out there to be accessible to different game developers. But these resources, I would not expect a game developer to like look over and use and have it go well, just because they were very basic. They were very like, make your fonts big and stuff like that. So the deeper stuff isn't really going to, like, placement and stuff like that isn't as talked about. So the other competition that I found was Mock Plus, in which the name of the author was just Trista, which I thought was very interesting because she just was Trista. And it was just kind of a blog post yet again, and it was a wireframing software, so that was a bit better, but it just didn't really come across as super professional because of just the look of the website. And I also found iCreative staffing for some of the competitors that I did find. This was a very old website. It hadn't been like overhauled or anything, and it was a staffing website. So yet again, it just didn't really fit together, and so it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm going to this website and I'm getting really great information. I propose a key sweet spot that all games should aim to achieve to step toward regulated accessibility guidelines. So if there were some guidelines in place to just kind of say, hey, we need to be more equitable, we need to kind of lift people, like newer players and like players who might not be able to understand as easily, up to be able to enjoy our game to the fullest extent. Through this prototype that I made, I feel like I was able to pinpoint a multitude of different problems that I saw, which were very crazy to see in a largely funded game like Monster Hunter. It's got a great fan base, so it's not losing money, and it has and it was made by Capcom, which also created like Resident Evil and like crazy franchises that, and it's very, very, very popular company. I did a comprehensive of each flow and figured out which one would be most beneficial for me to remake. So if you see this, if you look at this, I went through and I was looking at like the exiting the game workflow. So if you try to exit the game, you have to go like to options and then quit, and then it asks you if you want to quit again. Then you have to save your progress, and so it's just like very like feels heavy, like a chore to do almost. So I was just going through, taking loading screens, documenting the workflows that I found and the issues. And of course, like I said, I kind of decided on the options menu to remake. And this was that options menu, like the display and the audio. So I kind of used this whole mock-up to really go through and dig through what I found to be issues. Basically, some external feedback that I got from consumers was just that they love the graphics and the immersion of the game, but that there should be some more fluidity and similarity between the game UI, and that's what I try to do with like the fonts and just the colors and sticking to the branding. And then I also asked, have you ever stopped playing a game just because of the interface? And I also took into account that they would get nauseous because of the speed. So different issues within the game, like UX and UI always has to be thought about. If it's not thought about, then the game will be not good. It won't connect with the person like it should. Some of my suggestions for Capcom would just be to implement a new UI system creatively in the game, to make the UI sleeker and more streamlined, because that's what I did to it pretty much. I just made it sleeker, more streamlined, and tried to keep the user experience in the forefront of my mind. I would make like nausea-inducing effects toggleable, just because Monster Hunter can definitely make people nauseous because of like the movement style and the motion blur. I would also make the UI immersive so it plays cohesively with the pace of the game, as well as, even if controls have to be complex, make them complex in a well-organized, optimized way. I kind of tried to do that by just combining different workflows without getting rid of really all of the different abilities that you have within the game. For my game persona, my consumer, this was very similar to the person that gave me feedback, which was Eric. They both wanted the same things out of the game, an enjoyable experience pretty much. But the personas were really useful to be able to kind of understand and put myself into these different players' shoes. And overall, I learned that even the most funded games can completely overlook UX and UI. Unfortunately, I did not have enough time to post an outline of my UX UI tools and tips, but I am planning on using this foundation that I've made for myself to accomplish this over this summer. Overall, accessibility within games will only get better if game developers have an access to a solid guide. So I would like to be able to create kind of a comprehensive guide for game developers, or aid in creating that guide. The prototype that I made only makes that easier to see that functional design is so important, because functional design really adds a new layer to the game that just isn't in there already. And then I am contributing to this cause by raising my voice, rather than just allowing games to get away with poorly thought out UIs like Capcom and like Monster Hunter. I've just been learning as much as I can about accessibility design within games and user experience, and this has only affirmed how passionate I am for the subject. I really enjoyed this project and kind of recreating just the workflows, because I really would like to do UX and UI in the future, and I hope that you liked all of my changes.